The stars had always been a silent mystery to the people of Earth. For centuries, humans gazed up at the night sky, wondering if there were others out there, perhaps civilizations far more advanced than their own. Then, one fateful day, questions were answered. A fleet of alien ships appeared in the atmosphere, their sleek metallic bodies shimmering under the distant sunlight. The aliens, calling themselves the Zathar, arrived from a distant galaxy with a mission that was clear, yet chilling. They intended to conquer Earth. These beings were unlike anything Earth had ever seen. They were tall, their bodies built for strength and resilience, their technology beyond human imagination. The Zathar's ships hovered gracefully above the land, their forms casting shadows over cities below. News of their arrival spread quickly, across the globe, and people watched with a mix of awe and fear. Governments scrambled to respond, unsure of what kind of threat they truly faced. The Zathar's message was simple. Earth was now theirs, and humanity would have to bow before them. The world held its breath, waiting for the inevitable conflict. However, the Zathar's plans quickly unraveled. As they landed in various regions of the world, something unexpected occurred. From the deep, uncharted forests to the mysterious caves and valleys that few had ventured into, strange creatures began to emerge. These creatures were nothing like the aliens expected. They were wild, erratic, and chaotic, Earth space goblins. The Zathar had come prepared for an organized, structured battle, expecting to face human armies, advanced technologies, or at the very least, a civilized resistance. Instead, they encountered creatures that seemed to operate purely on instinct. The goblins appeared from every corner, their glowing eyes flashing through the darkness, their sharp teeth bared in an unsettling grin. They were fast, unnaturally so, and moved with an agility that caught the Zathar off guard. As the goblins attacked, their speed and ferocity were unlike anything the aliens had ever faced. The Zathar attempted to deploy their advanced weapons, hoping to subdue the goblins with their superior technology. But no weapon seemed to work as expected. The goblins dodged, swarmed, and tore through the alien forces with alarming speed, their screeches filling the air. The Zathar tried to retaliate, but the goblins' unpredictability made them nearly impossible to hit. The aliens' force fields barely held up against the relentless onslaught. They had expected to dominate with technology, but they had underestimated the chaos and fury of Earth's wild inhabitants. The goblins weren't just mindless creatures. They didn't follow any sort of strategy that the Zathar could decipher. There was no organization among them, no central command, just an overwhelming, wild energy that seemed to grow stronger with each attack. As the goblins swarmed the alien ships, clawing at their surfaces, tearing through their hulls, and disabling their weapons, it became clear that the Zathar were not prepared for this kind of warfare. The goblins' erratic behavior was their strength. Where the Zathar relied on precision and advanced planning, the goblins acted without thought, simply surviving by reacting to everything around them. In a battle of pure chaos, the Zathar found themselves outmatched. The aliens had not anticipated facing such an unpredictable and savage force. The once invincible Zathar began to retreat, unable to handle the onslaught of Earth's strange, untamable creatures. The aliens had underestimated the planet's ability to protect itself, never imagining that something as wild as the goblins could become the key to Earth's survival. In the chaos of the battle, humans watched in disbelief. The alien invasion, which had seemed so certain, was now faltering. The Zathar had underestimated not just Earth's people, but the very planet itself. The space goblins had proven to be an unexpected and powerful force, and in doing so, they had given humanity a rare chance, an opportunity to fight back. As the battle raged on, it became evident that the Zathar were losing control. The aliens, with their advanced technology and well-organized strategies, had never encountered anything like Earth's space goblins. The goblins fought without any discernible pattern, and this made them a nightmare for the Zathar. Every attack felt random, yet it was this sheer unpredictability that made the goblins so dangerous. While the Zathar were used to facing enemies who followed rules, who operated with logic and structure, the goblins had no such limitations. They did not think in terms of tactics. They didn't strategize. Instead, they simply attacked with wild energy. an overwhelming force of nature that didn't stop until their enemies were either destroyed or fled. The Zathar's weapons were formidable: energy beams that could melt steel, shields that repelled most forms of attack, and ships that could outmaneuver anything on Earth. Yet these defenses were ineffective against the Goblins. The creatures, quick and elusive, were everywhere. They climbed over Zathar ships with frightening agility, slipping through cracks, squeezing into tight spaces, and attacking from every angle. The Zathar tried to activate their force fields to protect their ships, but the Goblins didn't need to go through the front door. They smashed through walls, broke into systems, and attacked with claws and teeth, leaving chaos in their wake. Every time the aliens thought they had the upper hand, a new wave of goblins would appear from the forests, caves, or even the city outskirts, charging at the aliens with mindless fury. The Zathar tried to regroup, but the goblins didn't give them the chance. They swarmed in droves, their sharp claws ripping through the hulls of ships, and their shrill, high-pitched cries echoed through the battlefields, disorienting the invaders. Further, what made matters worse for the Zathar was their inability to predict the goblins' next move. The creatures didn't fight like any military force the Zathar had ever seen. There were no battle formations, no leaders barking orders. The goblins acted like a living storm, one that couldn't be controlled, one that struck without warning. Their attacks came from all directions at once, overwhelming the aliens in a way that no enemy ever had before. As the goblins attacked from every angle, the Zathar began to lose their composure. They tried to activate their most powerful weapons, but the goblins were too unpredictable. One moment, they'd be fighting near the edge of a forest. The next, they were inside the heart of an alien ship, causing havoc. The Zathar's highly advanced weapons systems, which had been designed to deal with all forms of known threats, couldn't adjust to the goblins' erratic behavior. These creatures did not fight according to any logic that the Zathar understood. Despite their advanced technology, the Zathar were forced to rethink their tactics. The battlefield wasn't one of strategy anymore. It had become a wild, untamed environment where the Zathar had no advantage. The goblins had turned the tables on the invaders by sheer force of unpredictability. The Zathar tried to flee, but the goblins were relentless. They pursued the aliens across the land, leaping onto their ships, tearing at the engines, and disabling their crafts. What was even more astonishing to the Zathar was that the goblins never seemed to tire. While the aliens relied on technology that needed to recharge, the goblins were fueled by nothing but their primal instincts, and this made them tireless. No matter how much the Zathar tried to push back, the goblins pushed harder. At the same time, the humans, who had initially been terrified by the arrival of the Zathar, began to see hope in the chaos unfolding around them. The Zathar's superior technology was being dismantled by these wild creatures, and the aliens seemed powerless to stop it. For the first time since the invasion began, the people of Earth felt a surge of optimism. The goblins, with their raw energy and unpredictable behavior, had given the humans a chance to fight back. As the Zathar's ships were brought down and their soldiers were scattered, it became clear that the tide of the battle was turning. The goblins weren't just wild animals, they were Earth's unexpected defenders. Their erratic, savage nature had proven to be the key to humanity's survival, and the Zathar were realizing, perhaps too late, that they had made a grave miscalculation. The space goblins had won the first round of this war, and Earth was not so easily conquered after all. The Zathar's defeat at the hands of Earth's space goblins was only the beginning of their problems. Despite the chaos and the failure of their initial strategy, the aliens refused to acknowledge the true nature of their enemy. They had been so certain that Earth would be an easy target. But now they found themselves trapped in a nightmare of their own making. While their forces retreated to regroup and rethink their tactics, the goblins continued to wreak havoc. With every passing day, the aliens were forced to adapt, yet they struggled to cope with the goblins' unpredictable attacks. The creatures seemed to grow stronger as the days went on, as if the more chaos they spread, the more energy they drew from the very planet they had come to conquer. The goblins didn't need rest. They didn't require supplies or weapons. They were pure, untamable forces of nature, thriving in their element. Their attacks were relentless, their numbers growing steadily, as if the very Earth itself was spawning them. In a sense, it was as though the planet had sent them to protect itself. The goblins never stopped. They seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from the shadows, ambushing the Zathar with brutal efficiency. Every time the aliens thought they had gained a foothold, the goblins would surge forth from the forests or caves, tearing through their defenses with terrifying speed and ferocity. It wasn't just physical strength that made them so dangerous. It was their ability to think without logic or reason. Their attacks were impulsive, driven by instinct rather than strategy, which made them impossible to predict. The Zathar began to wonder if the goblins even understood what they were fighting for, or if they were simply reacting to the presence of the invaders. Regardless of their motivations, the goblins' fury was undeniable. As weeks passed, the Zathar's once mighty fleet began to crumble. Their ships, once invincible, were now riddled with holes and punctured by the relentless assault of the goblins. No amount of advanced technology could keep the goblins at bay. The Zathar tried to fight back with force fields, lasers, and every weapon they had, but each time they engaged the goblins, they met only frustration and failure. The creatures' chaotic nature made them nearly impossible to hit. They moved faster than anything the Zathar had ever encountered. The aliens had relied on technology to outsmart their enemies, but against the goblins, their technology was useless. For the first time, they faced a foe they could not control or predict. It was a war of pure survival. The aliens quickly realized that they couldn't defeat the goblins with their usual tactics. The strategy of overwhelming firepower simply didn't work when their enemies didn't follow any rules. The Zathar had been trained to fight against organized forces, against enemies who could be reasoned with. But these goblins didn't care about negotiation or terms. They were a force of nature, and they would not stop until they had wiped out the invaders completely. Back on Earth, humans began to take notice of the ongoing battle. They had watched in awe as the goblins, whom they had once considered nothing more than a strange and mythical part of their world, had become the planet's unexpected protectors. What had started as a terrifying invasion had now turned into something else. The humans saw that the goblins, wild and unpredictable as they were fighting for something greater than themselves. The Zathar, for all their technological superiority, could not break the goblins' will. It wasn't just Earth's land and resources that were at stake anymore. The goblins fought as though they had a purpose, to preserve their world, to keep it free from the grip of the invaders. Humanity, watching the goblins' bravery, began to believe in something greater. The Earth was not a planet to be conquered. It was a living entity, with its own defenders, its own warriors. And the goblins were not just mindless creatures. They were guardians of the land, embodiments of the planet's will to survive. As the Zathar's forces dwindled and their morale collapsed, the goblins pressed on. No matter what the aliens threw at them, the goblins fought harder. They didn't need weapons. They didn't need plans. Their strength came from the land, from the Earth itself. And this was something the Zathar couldn't comprehend. With every victory, the goblins seemed to grow stronger, and the Zathar's fear deepened. They had come to conquer Earth, but they had underestimated the power of its native creatures, the raw, primal energy that pulsed through the planet. The invaders were realizing, with growing terror, that they had no place on this world, and the goblins would make sure of it. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was a fight for the very soul of the planet. And Earth's defenders, the space goblins, would not back down. The Zathar, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the brink of total defeat. Their forces were disintegrating, scattered across Earth's landscapes, their ships grounded, and their technology useless against the wild and relentless assault of Earth's space goblins. These creatures, born of the planet's deepest, darkest corners, had proven to be a force unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. The Zathar had come to Earth expecting a simple conquest, but they had underestimated the very essence of the planet they intended to dominate. The goblins fought with an unrelenting fury that couldn't be matched by any alien weapon or strategy. With each passing day, the Zathar's once pristine fleet became a series of burning wrecks, scattered across cities, forests, and valleys, each one a symbol of their failed attempt at invasion. The goblins, with their erratic behavior, continued to tear through the Zathar's defenses. It became clear that no force, no matter how advanced, could stand against Earth's wild defenders. The aliens had no choice but to rethink their strategy. When their ships grounded and their ranks dwindling, the Zathar decided to change tactics. They had to adapt. to find a way to deal with the goblins once and for all. They gathered what remained of their forces and retreated to a heavily fortified area, hoping to regroup and plan a counteroffensive. But even as they retreated, the goblins pursued them relentlessly, not giving the aliens a moment's peace. The wild creatures seemed to follow the Zathar everywhere they went, swarming over the hills, charging through the cities, and tearing apart anything in their path. The Zathar had been fighting a war of precision, but now they were caught in the chaos of a battle they couldn't control. The goblins' attacks never stopped. They came in waves, swift and unpredictable, overwhelming the aliens at every turn. There was no escape. The Zathar's once impressive defenses were no match for the goblins' ferocity. The aliens began to panic, their morale plummeting as the goblins showed no sign of slowing down. In desperation, the Zathar turned to their ultimate weapon. They had one last card to play, something they believed would turn the tide of the battle. It was a weapon so powerful that it could level entire cities in an instant, a weapon capable of wiping out entire populations. The Zathar, in their blind arrogance, had hoped to use this weapon to subdue Earth's defenders. But as they prepared to unleash their final strike, they made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the intelligence of the goblins. These creatures, despite their wild behavior, were not mindless animals. They had learned to adapt to every attack the Zathar had thrown at them. The goblins had observed the aliens closely, and they knew that the Zathar were now desperate. As the Zathar prepared to deploy their weapon, the goblins moved with uncanny precision, attacking from every direction, disrupting the aliens' final attempt at retaliation. They struck swiftly and decisively, causing the Zathar's plans to unravel before they could even get off the ground. The weapon, once thought to be Earth's doom, was now nothing more than a distant dream, rendered useless by the chaos the goblins had unleashed. In the midst of the chaos, humanity began to witness the true power of the goblins. The creatures had not only thwarted the Zathar's every attempt at conquest, but they had also shown the world that Earth was not a planet to be conquered. The goblins, though wild and seemingly chaotic, had fought with an unmatched determination to protect their home. The aliens, who had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, now found themselves utterly defeated by the very creatures they had once considered nothing more than a nuisance. The Zathar's retreat turned into a rout, their ships abandoned, their forces scattered, and their technology left behind. The invasion that had once seemed unstoppable was now over. The goblins had proven that Earth, with its unpredictable defenders, was a force no alien invader could control. And as the last of the Zathar forces fled, the goblins continued their march, unyielding, and the planet's defenders stood victorious. Earth had triumphed against an enemy that had underestimated its power, and the space goblins had become the planet's true heroes. The Earth had never been the same since the space goblins had emerged to protect it from the Zathar invasion. What began as an unexpected and terrifying conflict had turned into a clear victory for the planet's defenders. The Zathar, now a shattered force, had been forced to flee the Earth in disgrace. Their once pristine fleet was reduced to ruins, their soldiers scattered and broken, and their grand invasion plans crushed by creatures that defied all logic and reason. Earth's wild defenders, the goblins, had turned the tide of battle with their unrelenting spirit and chaotic attacks. The Zathar, with all their advanced technology, had never stood a chance against creatures that fought without fear and without hesitation. The goblins, in their own strange way, had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from technology or strategy, but from the raw, untamed will to survive. As the last of the Zathar retreated into space, Earth's inhabitants began to truly understand the magnitude of what had just transpired. News of the victory spread quickly across the globe, and humanity, once unsure of their place in the universe, now felt an overwhelming sense of pride and awe. The goblins, creatures that had once seemed like little more than myth or legend, had saved them from an alien conquest. People began to see the goblins in a new light. No longer were they just strange, unpredictable creatures of folklore. They were protectors, warriors in their own right. The goblins' wild and unpredictable nature had been exactly what Earth needed to push back the alien threat. They had turned the tables on an enemy that had thought itself invincible. Humanity began to view their world in a different way, realizing that there was more to Earth than they had ever known. The planet had sent its own defenders to fight back the Zathar, and in doing so, The goblins had reminded humanity of the power and strength of their world. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth began to rebuild. The damage caused by the invasion was significant, but the people of Earth were resilient. Cities that had been destroyed in the fighting began to rise from the ashes, and new technologies were developed to help protect the planet from any future threats. While the goblins continued to roam freely across the Earth, their presence was no longer seen as a mystery to be feared. Instead, they became symbols of Earth's indomitable will to survive. Governments and leaders started to work together, not just to recover from the invasion, but to ensure that no other alien force would dare challenge Earth again. As for the goblins, they remained a part of the landscape, continuing to protect the planet in their own strange way. They never needed any recognition or reward for their actions. They had fought for Earth because it was their home, and that was enough for them. The Zathar's defeat had lasting consequences for the entire galaxy. News of their failure quickly spread to other alien species, who had once looked upon the Zathar with respect and fear. If the mighty Zathar could be beaten by creatures so chaotic and unpredictable, what hope did they have? Earth, once considered insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy, had proven that it was a planet not to be trifled with. The space goblins had made sure of that, and as the years passed, Earth's reputation grew. Other alien species began to regard it with a mixture of respect and fear. The goblins, the wild defenders of Earth, became a legend. No one dared underestimate the planet again. The war was over, and Earth had won. The Zathar were gone, their ships floating in the void of space, abandoned and forgotten. The goblins, in their strange, chaotic way, had saved the planet. The humans, once unaware of the goblins' power, now understood that Earth's true strength lay not in its technology, but in its unpredictable defenders, creatures that had been born of the planet itself. They had come to protect the Earth, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever conquer a planet that fought with such fierce, untamable spirit. The space goblins had won the battle, and Earth, forever changed, stood as a testament to the power of its wild and unpredictable defenders.